Hello, my name's Jamie and this is Tom, and we run a blog called Daddy and Dad.
Yeah, we're two dads. We've got two little boys called Lyle and Richard.
Yeah, Lyle's 10 and Richard's 9, and we adopted them about 5 years ago. And back then we really struggled to find any first-hand information about adoption for gay or same-sex parents. So that's the reason why we set up the blog, and it's been established now for quite some time and it's doing really well. We've been together for about 12 or 13 years before we started the process of starting a family. And back then we were looking after our nephews quite a lot, weren't we? Our nephews, Sam and Finn, used to come around and stay.
Yeah.
And eventually when their mum, Tom's sister Katie, moved the family over to Germany, it really left quite a void in our lives, didn't it?
Yeah.
Where two little boys would fit.
Yeah, and we recognised that we could be dads, and we started our journey.
Yeah, we thought about lots of different methods of family planning, but adoption sat well with us because really we knew we wanted siblings, or at least two children, and we were quite open to the idea of having children that were a little bit older. So we made some inquiries and eventually we decided on an adoption agency, and we started the process about 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah. For me, that very first day when we met them was just amazing, incredible. Before we met the boys, all we'd seen is a photograph and a bio, basically, a little description of what they were and what they liked and those sorts of things. But actually meeting for the very first time was just a magical day. Surreal.
It was very nerve-wracking, but that was a really rewarding day because we actually finally got to meet our kids and introduce ourselves as Daddy and Dad and shake their little hands and really find out what they were like. That was amazing. But also for me, one really rewarding aspect of adoption was after the boys were placed with us, just seeing them develop their own little personalities and their confidence was building, and they took on some of our mannerisms and like our accents, and it was just really lovely to see their little characters developing. Especially sort of as the eldest one, Lyle, he started school very quickly after they moved in, so I got to and you went back to work, and I got to spend a lot of time with the little one, Richard, and we really bonded, and it was just so lovely to see him take on my accent and mannerisms and stuff like that. Magical.
And then there's also introducing our boys to both our families. We both have fairly big families, and to introduce them to grannies and grandpas and nieces and aunties and uncles and all those sorts of things was really rewarding and magical. Before the children were placed with us, our identity was a couple. We were Tom and Jamie, boyfriends. We'd been together for 12 or 13 years, and we developed a house together, and we both had full-time jobs. And we had a pet, and our life was quite settled anyway. But so when the kids moved in, that all changed very quickly and quite drastically. So really overnight we became Daddy and Dad rather than boyfriends. And we really had to put our relationship on a bit of a back burner while we sort of built an attachment with our boys and developed our routine as a family, and including sort of bedtime routine, having meals together, and also organising all the appointments for the boys. Like when you adopt and the kids move in, you have to take them to several medical appointments for their ears and hearing, for their teeth, for their eyes, and speech therapy and all this kind of stuff. And so our dynamic, really, we adjusted from boyfriends to parents really quickly, and as an adopted family, that's something that everybody will experience, not just gay dads. Yeah, definitely.
I guess another note for the kids, really, they had to adjust to a whole new routine, family life. They were quite homesick to begin with, but they bonded and settled with us really quickly, so we were quite lucky in that respect. They had to get used to our extended family, what to call everybody, and
there were a few slip-ups on what to call people, but it didn't take them long to get into the groove and for life to settle down to normal, really.
Yeah, I guess it took about a month or so for them to feel really at home. Another thing was they had to adjust, the boys both had to adjust to nursery and schools. So Lyle had to move from, we had to take him out of his primary school, he was only in reception, and put him into a reception class here. and that was a big adjustment for him because he had new friends, but luckily he's a bit of a football kid, so he quite quickly found a big group of friends who also like football, so he slipped in quite easily actually in there, didn't he? Richard, we had a few niggles with trying to socialise him with other kids his age, because he was really shy, and he'd always had Lyle sort of helping him with his arm around his shoulder. And so when Lyle went straight into primary school with us here, Richard, we had to take him to soft plays and all various different places where he could build his confidence and get to know other kids. So there was a big adjustment for them, but they're brave lads and resilient, and they really settled in quite fast, so we were really lucky in that respect.
For me, it's really important that you make time for one another as a couple when you're going through the process, and even when you've had your children placed with you. It's important to remember that you're a team, that you're a couple, you're husband and wife, wife and wife, husband and husband, whatever the dynamic is. It's important that you make time for one another, remember the reasons that you're together and the reason that you started that journey in the first place. It can be tough, and that can often be put right to the back of your mind because there's so much going on, but it's really important to try and make time for one another.
Yeah, I guess one thing we noticed, and one regret we have, is that despite knowing that we had sort of 18 months or 2 years of this adoption process to navigate before we were placed with children, we didn't make the most of the time we had left as a couple. So one piece of advice we would certainly give to prospective adopters is to really make the most of this time, this last bit of time you've got together as a couple. Go to hotels, have long baths in peace, because you'll be interrupted when you've got kids. You don't get very much time to yourselves. So holidays as well, go on romantic holidays, just really be romantic as much as you possibly can now, because when children are placed with you, it's very difficult to find even 5 minutes to yourselves. My piece of advice for people who are considering adoption is to research their local adoption charities and adoption agencies. Adoption agencies are really good because they're free to use, and also they're really well organised. And they're privately owned, or at least they're sort of funded privately.
Privately operated, but they're Ofsted regulated and inspected, so you can get a really good idea of how they're run, what they do, what their values are, what their last inspection rating was. All that sort of stuff is all available to you online, so you can make a really well-informed decision about which agency you run with.
Yeah, which is exactly what we did when we were starting the process. We just googled local adoption agencies, and then we found one that was really super, and I'm so glad we went with them, because we've heard lots of horror stories from people who went directly to local authorities to adopt, who actually also do a very good job on the whole as well. But adoption agencies and charities are really, really well organised, and we would wholeheartedly recommend that you use one.